Chapter 30, Chapter 28, The Sacrifice. Chapter 28, The Sacrifice.
So, what are the rules on this thing, anyways?
Kat asked Nina as the group walked through the halls of the castle's bottom floor, towards the east side, with the queen leading the way and a line of guards on either side.
Are we going to just have to wait out here for you, or what?
After breakfast had been brought to them, the queen had called the group to the throne room for the morning audience. Nina had not been present. There, before the entire court, the queen had announced the truth of Nina's identity, and formally recognized her as the crown princess and heir apparent to the throne of Windia. The court had exploded, unsurprisingly, but as soon as the queen announced that she would immediately be undertaking the ordeal of the sky, it had gone deathly quiet. Nina only hoped that none of her friends would realize why. For their part, most of the rest of the team had remained at the very back and stayed silent the whole time. Calling attention to themselves was the last thing they wanted, and most of them seemed to feel somewhat awkward about just being there. The only exceptions were Jean and Dees, who had come up in turn to corroborate the queen's words, Jean about Nina's identity, and Dees about her decision to undertake the ordeal. After that, Nina had declared her intent to do so immediately, and so they had departed, and were now approaching the entrance to the royal family's crypt.
No, I only have to enter the actual crypt alone,
Nina explained.
It's all right if I'm accompanied through the catacombs leading up to it. Actually, I'll probably need your help there. The sentry gargoyles are rather unpleasant. Sentry gargoyles, hey?
Bao grunted, clearly unimpressed.
Figures.
As always, he was keeping up a facade of detached amusement, but he couldn't quite manage to hide the worry in his eyes. He was concerned about something, but didn't seem suspicious.
Yeah, saw that one coming.
Sten shrugged.
There's always something. We'll handle it. You save your strength for when you have to go solo.
Unlike Bao, his relaxed attitude was probably genuine. To the cynical Highlander, this would be just another unpleasant part of the job that couldn't be avoided, and nothing more.
Thank you.
Nina smiled, fighting a brief flash of shame over the fact that she was still deceiving them, still not telling them just what it was that her choice would result in. It was necessary, though, and so she hid her guilt and kept her composure.
That would be the preferable course of action. I would have asked, but I didn't want to seem lazy. Nonsense,
Spar assured her.
It's simply the best strategy, is all.
As emotionless as always, its thoughts were a mystery to Nina, but she didn't mind that. It was simply Spar's way, and she had grown to accept that from the grass man.
We are professionals, yes.
Jean nodded.
We understand these things.
Jean, as always, was unchanged and unchangeable. It was a rare occasion that his constant cheerfulness was ever replaced by any other emotion, and even then it rarely lasted long. He was just as serious as everybody else about the situation. Of course, it was simply that he believed that at least one source of constant optimism was important for the group as a whole.
I suppose so, yes.
Nina nodded.
Thank you, all the same. You truly have changed,
her mother said quietly as they approached the barricaded door to the catacombs. Two guards were standing side by side in front of it, pikes held at their sides.
You've grown up so much, Nina. I had to, Mother,
Nina replied, refraining from elaborating more. The two of them were the only ones present who knew the truth, and she wasn't entirely sure her mother understood why she was keeping it from her friends.
I know,
the queen agreed.
But still.
She trailed off, then sighed and stood before the guards.
Open the door. My elder daughter, the crown princess, Nina Windia, will now undertake the ordeal of the sky as was foretold 1,000 years ago. Yes, your majesty,
one of the guards said as the other began undoing the bolts and locks. By their lack of surprise, it was probably safe to assume that word of the announcement had spread to them both already.
Good.
She nodded.
Have you anything to report before she proceeds? Only one thing,
the other guard replied.
That man who you have authorized to visit the royal family's crypt anytime he wishes did so last night. He has not yet come back out, and so he is probably still in there. What's that all about?
Kat asked, looking puzzled. Much like Jean, her upbeat personality remained unchanged by the somber tone in the air. It remained a mystery to Nina how she could be so cheerful about life in general, considering how dismal it had been from what she knew of her past, but as always she was grateful for that quality of hers. It was one of the reasons Kat had become her best friend in the past few months.
Or is it some kind of state secret or something? You could say that, but we've all met him before,
Nina explained. There was no point in hiding it now.
The old hermit in that cavern in northern Sima. Martin. It took me a while to realize it, but I remember seeing him come here to go into the crypt when I was a child. Is that so?
Ryu said, eyes narrowing.
Well, isn't that interesting?
He had been one of the most taciturn of them today, almost as much as Rand, and unlike the big man, that was unusual enough to be noticeable as a sign of his mood. Whether he suspected something, or simply didn't like what he knew of what she would have to do, was up in the air. The dichotomy between his and Nina's mind wasn't quite as large as that between hers and Kat's, but it was close, enough so that his thought processes were often a mystery to her. That, of course, was part of why she was so strongly attracted to him.
I doubt it's going to be a problem,
Nina told him, idly wondering why she was focusing so much on how her friends were acting today before it suddenly dawned on her, this would be the last day she would be among them as one of their own, and she wanted to remember them as they were because of that, so that she always would.
And if it is, I'll deal with it,
Dees added. The sorceress had been calmly observing her all morning, a question in her eyes, and with a flash of insight, Nina realized that she would almost certainly know the truth as well. She hadn't told the others, though, if any of them knew, there was no way they wouldn't be calling her on it. Which meant that Dees probably intended to do so herself later, and probably in private.
We gonna go down there, then?
Rand asked impatiently. Despite the gravity of the occasion, and his recognition of how much it had cost Nina to come back here, he was still maintaining his barely concealed, continual anger over his mother's disappearance. Cynically, Nina couldn't stop herself from wondering if he would even complain, were he to know about her plan. Before cutting herself off, Rand was a good man, even if they weren't as close as some of the others, and he deserved better than that.
Might as well.
Ryu nodded, leading the way in, and the others followed him, Nina hanging back even more than usual.
I'll see you when you return,
her mother said simply, and Nina inclined her head towards her before descending the stairs behind the door. Situated on a mountaintop as it was, Windia Castle had a massive network of basement tunnels beneath the building. These were separated into two unconnected halves. The east side contained the famous labyrinth dungeons, whose cells held prisoners as well as access to the great bridge spanning the Windian Chasm on their eastern border. The west side was devoted to the equally labyrinthine catacombs leading to the massive crypt of the royal family, filled with the remains of millennia of Nina's ancestors.
So, how long until we start running into these sentry gargoyles?
Kat asked, voice echoing around the dark and dusty tunnel. Fortunately, it seemed somebody had lit the wall torches recently.
We'll probably start seeing them on the second level down,
Nina replied as they approached a staircase leading down.
Just ignore that one, it's a dead end. We want the second staircase. Anyways, they all have patrol routes, so hopefully we'll only run into a few of them. That doesn't make much sense,
Sten commented, frowning.
If there's only one way down, why have them patrol passageways that are dead ends? Because there is more than one way,
Nina explained.
We're taking the easiest one, is all. As long as you know the way, that's fine with me.
Bao shrugged.
Although I would kind of like to know just which one of your ancestors thought all these mazes were a good idea. Nothing personal. I was never really a fan of them either,
Nina agreed, following them down the next staircase. Now the tunnels began growing more complicated, turning and branching often.
Alright, the trick here is to keep turning right. Sounds easy enough.
Ryu nodded, then paused as a gargoyle stepped around the corner straight ahead of them.
Well. Except for that.
It was almost as tall as Rand, though not nearly as bulky, its stone muscles more lean. Hands and feet were all clawed, like those of a bird, its wings were broad and bat-like, and its face bore a hideous fanged beak. Seeing them, its green eyes glowed, and grey stone morphed into leathery red flesh. Beak gaping in a silent snarl, it lashed out with one clawed hand, pinning Ryu to the wall.
Oh, no you don't, asshole,
Kat growled, leaping into the air and dealing it a vicious crack upside the chin with her new battle staff. Swaying on its feet, it dropped Ryu and turned on her, only for the swordsman to remove the offending limb with a swift slice. Reeling back, still silent, it was about to rush again before a crossbow bolt slammed into its right eye, and it collapsed. The red coloration faded, as the magic animating it departed with its life, and it crumbled into a pile of rubble.
Nice shot,
Ryu told Bao.
Fairly routine.
He shrugged.
Wasn't sure if it would work, since they're not technically alive, but it looks like it did. Interesting magic animating them, though,
Dees commented as they proceeded.
Mind if I take the next one? I want to get a good look at it. I'll hold it down for you,
Rand offered, and she gave him a look that Nina could tell wasn't entirely teasing. Even in her true form, her face was the same, and Nina had known her long enough to know the difference between a smirk and an actual smile.
Well, aren't you gentlemanly today? I appreciate it. No charge.
He actually smiled back, even though it looked slightly strained due to his mood, and Nina mentally resolved to talk to Dees about that later tonight. As if on cue, at that moment another gargoyle stepped around the corner.
There we go. All right, come here, you.
Stepping around the others, the big farmlander ignored its claws raking at his chest. They failed to penetrate the strange stone armor he had bought from Beretta and Leamington. Seizing its wrists in his own massive hands, he slammed it against a wall before delivering a headbutt, dazing it.
Go ahead and get a good look. All right,
Dees said, stepping up and examining it. Sten scratched his head.
Guys, not to be down on the higher arts or anything, but is this really the time for an extended analysis? It's fine,
Nina told him. It was nice, seeing just how far the group had come in such a short time. More than once, she had seen Ryu smiling quietly and saying nothing as he had watched them work, and she knew the reason for that. It was pride in the group he led, how well they had learned to work together, and how formidable they were when they did. Thinking of it, she glanced at him now and saw him doing exactly that. Catching her eye, he winked, and she smiled as well.
I do not wish to intrude, but there is another one approaching,
Jean pointed out, gesturing down the hall with the point of his rapier as a second gargoyle crept around the same corner as the one Rand was holding.
Shall we deal with it? Nah, we've got this.
Dees glanced up at Rand.
Thanks. Think you could throw it? Sure,
Rand grunted, hefting the struggling gargoyle up over his head before turning and heaving it into the second one.
Your turn. Oh, yeah.
Grinning wickedly, she raised her cane, and a grey cone of wind descended upon the gargoyles. Unlike a natural tornado, it only turned its fury upon those it actually touched, and the group was completely unaffected, far enough away that they didn't even feel a breeze. The gargoyles were less lucky, gravel sprayed from within the spell wildly, and when the air magic faded no trace of either one remained. As always, Nina could sense that it was better than any tornado she could create. Dees had always outclassed her, even back in the magic school.
Nice work,
Ryu told them both, and they nodded in unison.
All right, let's keep going. It should be just around the next turn,
Nina told them, and indeed it was. Descending the stairs, they stepped into a wide room with 5 tunnels stretching off ahead of them, side by side.
On this floor, the trick is to always take the one in the center. If you say so.
Cat grimaced.
I don't know how you keep all this straight. I might be able to remember one floor, but more than that? Not a chance. I've had a lot of time to learn it,
Nina told her, glancing at Dees.
Out of curiosity's sake, what was your opinion on these? The technique's interesting, but these are a sloppy example of it.
She snorted.
It's elementary stuff. A third-year student back in Oria could duplicate the technique. Stone to life, and nothing more. If somebody actually talented got a hold of this kind of magic.
She shuddered as they made a right turn.
Bad?
Sten asked.
Worse than bad,
Nina said, shaking her head.
I came to the same conclusion a couple years back when I thought about what I remembered of these things. It had been a long time, but when I combined my memories of them with what I had learned in the magic school, it seemed to me that I could do a lot more with the animation magic. For a while, I wondered why the royal family kept it a secret, until I realized that if it got out...
She left it hanging, glancing at Dees.
If either one of us, or either of you, tried doing it.
She inclined her head towards Bao and Rand.
Once we had the knack down, we'd probably be able to create gargoyles that could slay demons. Yeesh.
Bao made a face.
Okay, no. Just no. If that kind of thing got out, there's no telling where it would stop. We had better keep quiet about this. I am not quite sure I see the problem, Mon Ami, but if it is that important, I will consent to this necessity, yes.
Jean nodded.
Yeah, we know how to keep our mouths shut,
Ryu agreed as they walked into another room with multiple tunnels and chose the middle one again, despite the gargoyle advancing down.
Here comes another one. Who wants it? Our turn.
Sten glanced at Jean, who nodded, and they advanced.
Spar, you in. As we are the only 3 who have not yet got one, that does seem appropriate,
the grass man said, nodding. As Sten blasted it in the face with an atmospheric detonation, Spar seemed to concentrate on a patch of mold growing on the wall near the floor. Rippling oddly, the mold suddenly grew further and spread underneath the gargoyle's feet, causing it to slip and fall on its rear. Before it could get back up, Jean was there, skewering it through the heart with one expert thrust. The gargoyle turned to stone, and he pulled his rapier free without any trouble.
Does anybody else ever wonder if maybe we've gotten a little too cavalier about this kind of thing?
Bao asked, raising an eyebrow.
Not really.
Sten shrugged as they kept going.
It's all part of the job, you know. One nice thing about all of us having seen a lot worse, I guess.
Ryu chuckled dryly.
None of this really gets to us anymore.
They made a left turn, and then emerged into another room of tunnels.
Center again,
Nina told them, and they proceeded, emerging from it into a larger cavern. Unlike the rest of the catacombs, it looked natural rather than man-made, a crude stone path leading across an underground lake with torches set into pillars on both sides. On the plus side, there were no gargoyles.
All right, this is the entrance to the crypt. So you have to go it alone from here?
Kat asked as they walked across.
What happens if anybody else comes in with you? I'll fail the ordeal, she explained. The statues simply won't respond, and I won't be able to receive the breath of wind. Statues?
Ryu frowned, then blinked as they grew closer to the back of the cavern.
Oh.
At the end of the path, standing next to an iron door, was a gigantic humanoid statue, shield in one hand and sword in the other, clad in plate mail with vast wings spreading from its back.
You're not going to have to fight those, are you? Only the one inhabited by the Queen of the Sky,
Nina told him.
And that one scaled more realistically. One statue, hey.
Kat grunted.
All right, but just be careful. I know you're tough, but one-on-one isn't really your thing. I'm aware.
She nodded.
I've been preparing, and I've watched how all of the rest of you fight physically. I think I'll be able to pull it off. She used the rapier, yes?
Jean inquired.
It is not as powerful a weapon as many others, but still deadly in skilled hands. Ah, if only I could undergo the ordeal for you. To duel such a legend would be a thing I would remember all my life. I appreciate the thought, but this is my ancestor, and my choice.
Nina took a deep breath as they approached, steeling herself for what was to come. It was the only way, she had come to terms with that back in hometown, before they had even come.
And this is my ordeal to face. Sounds like you've made up your mind, then.
Dees gave her a direct look.
Just keep that in mind, and you'll be able to pull it off. If she gets you on the defensive, you'll get creamed, but it goes both ways, she's all offense. Keep casting on her, and she'll go down. And whatever you do, don't let her get above you. I'll remember that.
Nina nodded as they reached the statue.
Thank you.
Staring up at it, she swallowed, then stepped forward, heart beating loud enough that she was almost surprised it wasn't echoing in the cavern.
My name is Nina Windia, Crown Princess of our land and our clan. I have come to undertake the ordeal of the sky. Nina.
A deep, echoing voice came from the statue's face.
Yes. You are of the royal family. Has the time come, then? It has,
Nina said, trying to appear more determined than she actually felt.
I am the one for whom the Queen of the Sky has been waiting. I am ready to meet her, and to take up her burden. That remains to be seen,
the statue told her, still unmoving.
Hear me, Princess. Only those of our family may enter the crypt of the royal family, and in these circumstances, only you may proceed to face the ordeal. All others must remain here, even the sorceress of Wisdom. I wondered about that,
Dees muttered under her breath.
About what?
Rand asked her, just as quietly.
Never mind. It's not important. They know, and accept this,
Nina replied, ignoring that despite her own curiosity as to why the statue was so specific, and why Dees had expected it.
I will enter alone, and face the ordeal alone. Now, hold on here.
Ryu raised his voice, and they all turned to stare at him as he glared up at the statue.
I'm descended from the Queen of the Sky too. Where's that leave me? Normally, you would be allowed to enter,
the statue replied after a moment.
However, the ordeal must be faced alone. And after it's over?
Ryu pressed.
What about after she finishes? Can me and Dees come in and meet her in there, once the ordeal's finished? That is acceptable, the statue said after remaining silent for several moments. I will inform you when the ordeal has concluded, so that you may retrieve her. Unless she fails, in which case there will be no need to take her body from its resting place with the rest of our family. That will not happen,
Nina vowed, though her heart had faltered for a moment at its words.
I will triumph. Then go, and prove your words,
the statue boomed, and the door slowly slid open of its own volition.
I'm off, then.
She turned to face them, and everybody's face was solemn now, even Jean's.
I suppose I'll see you when I'm done. Win this,
Ryu told her gravely, and she smiled quietly, resisting the urge to kiss him. It would just make it harder for him, and it wouldn't mean anything after tonight, not to mention how it would probably hurt Kat to see. Still, a selfish little part of her continued to think that if the Warren girl was going to get him in the end, 1 or 2 last kisses shouldn't be begrudged, and she had to fight to keep that impulse down.
I will,
she said instead, forcing a smile she didn't feel, and then she turned and flew through the door, into the crypt. The land of Windia had existed beyond recorded history. More than 3,000 years of kings and queens, princes and princesses were entombed within the crypt, new hallways added whenever more room was needed. Lining both sides, coffins topped by memorial statues cast in their features, they watched Nina walk past in silence, cold stone faces impassive.
Nina.
A ghostly voice whispered in her ear, and she tensed up, almost dropping out of the air.
Nina, why are you here? What are you doing? I am undergoing the ordeal,
Nina replied, not stopping, not even turning her head. She knew there would be nothing there.
It is my destiny, and my fate. You came for the breath of wind.
Another voice hissed harshly.
You, little girl. Don't be so cocky. You think you could defeat the greatest hero our clan has ever known? You, a hired mage? A killer for money? You could never do it. Shameful, that our line has fallen so low,
yet another voice agreed.
A mercenary? The crown princess, the heir to the throne, living such a life? You dishonor us all with your very existence, and now you claim to be the destined one your ancestor has suffered so long for? Give it up, and go back to your petty little life with your fellow thugs. You're unworthy of being part of our family at all, let alone of the breath of wind. You're wasting your breath, you know,
Nina said calmly, despite her automatic instinct to shrink away, to turn around and go back.
I overcame all of those doubts long ago. My friends are good people, all of them, even those with sins in their pasts. If you're trying to get to me that way, you might as well just stay silent. It won't work, and neither will trying to make me doubt myself. I know how to keep going, no matter how much I do. Your will is strong,
a voice said after a long silence, rather than anger. This one carried with it a tone of sympathy and sorrow.
But that can blind you as well as it helps you. Your will is the only thing carrying you forward at this point, is it not? You don't want to do this, but you force yourself to continue anyways, because you think it's the right thing to do. But Nina, you know the price. If you use the breath of wind, you will lose yourself. Your sentient mind, and your memories of your life. They will be gone forever, and you will be nothing more than a bird. I am aware,
Nina said clinically, continuing onwards despite the way her heart faltered at the thought.
It is not a choice I enjoy making, but it is necessary, and it was fated. Ever since I learned of my destiny, I have prepared for the possibility of this coming to pass. Now the time is here, and the legend is true. This is the only way. Then you intend to throw away your life?
Another voice asked.
Everything that you have lived for? You will forget your family, your friends. Even the man you love. You'll lose everything, Nina. If you can never return to your normal form, your state of mind. Isn't that just like dying?
Yet another voice asked sympathetically.
You're sacrificing your life, Nina. I am.
Nina nodded, wings continuing to carry her forward towards the door at the back of the main hall.
For my friends. And for all the world, that will be lost to the demons if we do not succeed. So it was fated, and so it shall be done. I am ready. Ready to give up, and become nothing more than a mere bird.
One last voice asked softly as she entered the doorway, fading away behind her.
I see. Then goodbye, Nina Windia. Whether you succeed or fail. Today is your final day.
The room at the end of the hall was small and simple, there was enough room to move around in, but little more. Its only feature was the statue at its center, one unlike the others. This statue was of a strange suit of plate mail, slim and thin, including a pair of steel wings. Its rapier was held before it in both hands, and its winged helmet looked upward towards the ceiling. As she floated towards it, the old man standing before it turned to meet her eyes.
So, you've come,
Martin said quietly.
I was afraid you would. Dees told you, didn't she?
Nina guessed, floating down to the floor next to him.
When we came back to India. She knew why. One of the things I filled her in on when she woke up,
Martin conceded.
Look, Nina. I don't know why you're here, why you're so desperate. I'm really hoping Lawton doesn't have anything to do with this. But whatever it is, it's still your decision. You don't have to do this. You can turn back. It's up to you. They have Ran's mother,
Nina told him quietly.
And I find my father's sudden illness to be highly suspicious. This isn't about fate, great father. If fate was all it was, I'd gladly turn my back and never return. I'm here because our enemies have done everything they can to ruin our lives, for as long as we have been alive in at least one case, and probably more. For what they did to Ryu, and to Rand, and to all of us. We have to stop them. Then this isn't about saving the world,
Martin said grimly.
It's personal. And it's about vengeance. Yes.
Nina continued to meet his eyes, unflinching, as her sense of doubt finally, actually vanished.
I'm no hero, great father. None of us are. Ryu's been saying this the entire time, and he's right, about all of us. I'm not sacrificing myself for the world. I'm doing it for my friends. So they can escape this destiny bullshit, as we put it, and finally have a chance for a normal life again, like we thought we all did before Loden started speaking to us. And yes, so that they can find the demons responsible for all of this, and deliver the appropriate amount of payback. Good,
Martin grunted, and smiled bitterly when she blinked.
Did you think I wouldn't approve? Maybe we called ourselves heroes, but that was just for the public relations value. So we would inspire everybody else to follow our lead and stand up against the Dark Dragon Empire. When you get right down to it, I was in it for two reasons. To find out what happened to my sister, and to get payback on the Empire for everything they did to me. Personal reasons. If you were here just because destiny said so, you would never be able to pull it off. But if this is heartfelt for you, if it's personal, you'll be able to back it up. I know you will. Thank you, great father.
Nina nodded slowly.
Is that why you're here? To make sure I knew what I was doing? Not really.
Martin shook his head, looking up at the statue again.
Don't get me wrong, I'm glad to see that. But the reason I'm here is to say goodbye. When Dees told me the day had come, I dropped everything and came here to see her, one last time, before it happened. She's conscious.
Nina's eyes widened.
Already? But that means...
She trailed off, horrified.
That she always was.
Martin slowly nodded.
Yeah. I'm afraid so. She's been conscious for every single second of every single year since that bastard Loden did this to her. That's why I always came here, every year. To see her. I'd have stayed all year long, but we couldn't take it. Either of us. We just couldn't.
His hands began to shake.
Indeed we could not,
another, female voice agreed as the statue's head tilted downwards to look at her.
And so, for nearly 1,000 years now, I have awaited your arrival, alone in the darkness. I have protected the breath of wind within me, within this statue, all for you. I am Nina Windia, guardian of the wind. And now you come to claim that breath, and I will ask you again. Why are you here? Why have you come? So that my friends and companions will be able to find the truth,
Nina said calmly as Martin stepped back, out of the way.
So that they can put an end to this demonic conspiracy, and take back their lives. In order for that to happen, we must have the sky. I need the breath of wind. I see,
the Guardian murmured, strangely metallic tone echoing through the room, as color began to infuse its metal surface, just like the gargoyles. Slowly, grey turned to pink and white and blue and gold, as it lowered its rapier slightly.
Then your goal is to save the world from these demons you speak of. If that is what it takes.
Nina nodded slowly.
Yes. If that's what it takes.
The Guardian said harshly.
Don't make me laugh. Do you intend to save the world, or not? Yes, or no? Do you think you can actually do it? Do you believe Loden's words? In this destiny bullshit you so despise? Do you believe, Princess Nina Windia? I don't know,
Nina answered honestly, looking downward.
I still have trouble believing that somebody like me could be the one the legend speaks of. I just don't know if I could ever actually live up to that.
She raised her head again, and locked her eyes with the statue's visor.
But know this, Great Mother. For the lives of those I love, I am willing to take the risk of being wrong. I'll do anything in order to free them from these chains of fate. Whether it's real or not, the demons will never leave us in peace unless we destroy this conspiracy of theirs. I will do whatever it takes to make that happen. Fine, then.
The Guardian took one hand from its rapier, and raised the blade in a salute with the other.
Then come, and show me your resolve firsthand.
Without another word, its metal wings began to beat, and it rose into the air before lunging forward. Nina was ready for the lunge, and for what would follow it. She had seen enough of Jean's fighting style to be able to predict it. What she didn't expect was just how fast it would be. Even as she dove to the side, snarling the words of the spell she meant to counterattack and block with, she saw the lunge turning into a sideways swipe. For a moment, she almost thought she wouldn't be in time, that she would die within the first few seconds of the fight. Thankfully, she was wrong. The spell formed, as frigid energy coalesced into a floating head formed of ice with identical faces on both sides. Appearing between them, it blocked the rapier before opening eyes and mouth on the side facing the guardian and releasing arctic winds, cold enough that ice formed on the statue instantly, covering its surface and freezing its joints. It hesitated, and Nina seized that moment to try and put more distance between them.
Running away already?
The guardian asked derisively, spinning and planting an armored foot in her chest that slammed her back into a wall.
Your will is strong, but your heart is weak. You're lying to yourself, Nina Windia.
Flexing its limbs, it charged straight towards her, ignoring the ice. Nina chose to respond with actions, rather than words. Standing her ground, she whispered the words of another spell, and summoned up a pyramid of flames straight in the guardian's path. 4 spheres of magic appeared and filled the space between them with roaring fire, but no statue emerged, and Nina's eyes shot skyward.
Trying to crack me with temperature shock?
The guardian said, hovering above her. It had blasted upwards, avoiding the spell entirely.
Did you think I've never seen that trick before? You're a fool twice over, then.
Gripping its sword in both hands, it descended like a thunderbolt.
Whatever you do, don't let her get above you.
Dees warned her, in the tone of one who had seen what would happen to those unfortunate enough to do so many times over.
Oh, damn,
Nina whispered, as death descended on wings of steel, melting ice dripping from it as the heat and light from the flame spell baked it from behind. There was no time for casting any more spells, or for any attempts at dodging. All she could do was raise her focusing ring, the only thing she had even resembling a physical weapon. Instead of the carefully shaped, formed, and controlled spells that were her preferred means of attack, all it could do was release small blasts of power, but it could do so on the spot, without any casting time. Now, it did so even as the blade fell, and though it could not halt it, its course was slightly altered. Instead of plunging straight through her skull, it simply skewered her left arm, from the shoulder down. Screaming wordlessly in agony, Nina jerked back, and the rapier slid back out with a hideous slithering noise. Landing on its feet, the guardian stalked forward slowly, and Nina suddenly realized that it was no longer taking her seriously. It already believed the fight had been won, despite her escape from the killing blow, and intended to finish her off immediately. With that realization came a flash of shame and anger, and she choked off her shriek of pain, stumbling back up to her feet and then into the air. As the guardian's visor followed her, she unleashed spears of lightning. Unlike the usual method, in which the bolts were kept vertical and scattered across a wide field, she turned them to the diagonal and plunged them all into the armored statue from multiple angles. This finally produced a noticeable effect. The statue writhed, though its steel shape refused to actually crack. The ice had all been melted, and its temperature apparently normalized. Still, it hesitated, and Nina flew backwards in the air further, putting more distance between it and her. Seeing this, the guardian spread its wings and launched itself straight at her, in a swooping maneuver that a normal wing clansman never would have been able to pull off. In response, Nina created another freezing head, only for the guardian to swerve over it easily and dive upon Nina, rapier slashing down for the kill.
Did you think I would fall for that again?
It demanded.
Thrice a fool. Gotcha,
Nina managed to grit out between clenched teeth, clutching her ruined arm, as the face on the back of the head opened its maw and froze the guardian. Though it didn't stop, its movements were slowed enough for Nina to detonate the air directly below her own feet, blasting herself upwards and out of the way with much more speed than her wings could normally produce by themselves.
Still running away?
The guardian shouted, slashing upwards at her and clipping her legs. As she stumbled, its left hand thrust out, and burning pain shot through her stomach. Staring down, Nina saw its source, a slim hilt protruding from her belly, dripping blood. The guardian had concealed a knife, and thrown it, and now it was blasting up towards her again.
Still a coward at heart. Stop lying to yourself, and admit your own weakness.
Never, Nina hissed back, pain giving way to the cold black rage of killing intent. The flaming pyramid spell would be dodged just as easily as before, and it was likely the lances of lightning would be avoided as well now that she had seen the spell. There was only one way to win at this point, a spell she had never been able to cast before, but that she had seen Dees do recently. At the time, it had driven home just how inferior she was to the sorceress of Wisdom, but now, performing it was the only way not to lose everything. Everything she loved, and everything she lived for. Another air detonation drove her back against the wall, out of the way of the Guardian's rising slash, and it halted above her before descending, rapier gripped in both hands once more. Nina watched it come, as she whispered the words of the spell, and summoned up one last burst of sheer willpower. Her mind and her words gave it shape and form and flame, as 3 volcanic hands rose from the floor, seized the Guardian, and carried her away to smash her back down to the stone.
You.
The Guardian's voice whispered, as it struggled to rise again, then stopped. Piece by piece, section by section, the full body plate mail shattered, revealing the woman underneath. She was of the same age as Nina's mother, and like her, appeared to be holding the worst effects of elderhood back, but only barely. Still, her features remained slight and cute, almost pixie-like despite the wrinkles and wear. Slim and short, she wore a blue leotard and headband, her hair was trim and cut in a strangely triangular style, gold and silver mixed, and her wings a pure, vibrant white. Most noticeable of all, however, was the fact that she flickered oddly in the air, fully visible one moment and transparent the next.
She did it,
Martin said quietly, walking over to crouch next to Nina.
I told you she could. Indeed you did, and I agreed.
The Guardian smiled, raising a hand, and a flood of healing magic poured out from it, completely soaking Nina's body. It was more than she had ever seen Bao Rand or even Ray produce at once, and a strange sensation in her guts caused her to look down and see the knife actually being forced out by the regeneration of her flesh. Within seconds, both it and her arm were fully recovered.
Sorry about all that crap I was giving you,
she continued as Nina looked back up and met her eyes, a bright sky blue.
I kind of had to play the bad guy, and I'm not really suited for that, so I went a little over the top. It wasn't any fun for me either.
Now that she was out of the armor, everything about her had changed. Voice, mannerisms, tone, and attitude were those of a much younger girl, one who still saw wonder and beauty in everything she encountered in the world. Or perhaps of a woman who had somehow managed to never stop.
So?
Nina murmured.
You really are my great mother. I am.
The Guardian slowly nodded.
And you? You freed me from my imprisonment. Thank you, Nina. This is yours, by right and by reward.
From the scraps of armor, a piece of paper flew out, blown as if by a breeze, and Nina caught it out of the air. On it was the emblem of the House of Windia, in black ink.
This is the mark of the great bird, in which my breath of wind was sealed. Take it to the top of the ceremonial tower at the moment of dawn, face the open sky and touch it to your forehead, and it will become yours. Thank you.
Nina slipped it into a pocket of her robes and stood again.
You know, I always wondered, but we don't really look that much alike after all. Do you really think so?
The Guardian tilted her head to the side, still smiling cheerfully.
I think we do. Not in the eyes, I'll admit. But the rest of the face. I can see it. I wish I had time to meet your sister, too. It's time, then?
Martin asked quietly, walking towards her.
So soon? It's been nearly 1,000 years, my love,
the Guardian replied, though she seemed unable to look at him now.
Since we fell in love, and weakened both the breath of fire and the breath of wind as a consequence of our actions. We were warned, and yet we would not change our minds. And we knew today would be the day.
She glanced at Nina again, eyes sympathetic.
Our time is past, but these young ones. The path they will take is still in question. Are you really going to do it, Nina? Are you willing to permanently become a great bird, for the sake of your friends? Yes.
Nina met her eyes, and now all her hesitation and doubt was gone.
For the people I love. For the man I love, the friends who are like family to me now, and the family who I left behind years ago. Yes. I will do what I must. Before I go, then,
the Guardian said softly.
I have but one more question for you. Can you ever forgive me, for the choice I made that forced this fate upon you? For knowing that it was wrong, to love a man of the Dragon Clan, and doing so regardless? For dooming our clan to the loss of the breath of wind, and you to that which awaits you tonight? How could I not?
Nina smiled sadly.
I would be the world's greatest hypocrite if I did. After all, I love a man of the light dragons as well. When you get right down to it, I'm doing this for him. So he can have the life he's always dreamed of. It always seems to happen that way.
Martin shook his head.
Between the man named Ryu, and the woman named Nina. Your friend, Kat. It complicates matters. But you, and him. And me, and her. And the crazy old tramp, and the girl he refuses to talk about. And maybe even further back than that. Crazy old tramp.
Nina repeated, raising an eyebrow. Despite the gravity of the situation, she couldn't help but comment on that.
Long story,
the Guardian told her, shrugging.
But he has a point. Beyond that, even further back than them. Back beyond recorded history. There's something there, that only Dees and Loden know, that influences us all. And yet, I can't force myself to regret it. Any of it. Even after 1,000 years. Thank you, great daughter. For understanding.
Turning to Martin, she reached her hands out and embraced him, as he did to her.
It's time. All right,
Martin whispered, before leaning forward and kissing her, as she did to him. Together, they stood there in the center of the room, locked in each other's arms, for a moment that seemed like an eternity. And then she began to glow, brighter than the sun, and still Martin stood there unflinching, though Nina was forced to shield her eyes. Soon, all too soon, the light faded. And then both Martin, and the Guardian, stared in disbelief as she remained in his arms, made flesh and blood once more.
What?
She whispered, awestruck.
What? What?
Martin said, just as stunned.
What? In all things, I have always done what was necessary.
A new voice suddenly filled the chamber, and all of their eyes looked upward towards the ceiling as a hole in it opened, bathing both Martin and the Guardian in sunlight.
Never have I liked doing so, but always I have, because somebody must, and always have I been despised for it. I have done what was necessary here. But never was it said that it was necessary for this to be the end. I do what I must. But the choice of what is necessary has never been mine. Loden.
Nina whispered, recognizing it.
Always, there is a choice,
Loden continued, voice still disembodied.
And a choice made for love is the strongest of all. Such a choice as that is beyond even the laws of magic. For that choice, I will give much of what little power remains to me gladly, for never did I enjoy what I had to do. I know that it is not enough, not merely, to gain me forgiveness. But I give it regardless, not for redemption. But because, despite how bound by fate and destiny the nature of my very existence is, I, like you, am still a being with thoughts and feelings and emotions. It's not for the big picture, then.
Martin said quietly, voice burning with anger still, as he glared up at the ceiling.
Not even slightly. No,
Loden told him firmly.
This is for you, and for you. Nothing more. You are neutral, and you will have no impact on what is happening in this world, here and now. Had you taken my side, or that of my enemies, I would not have been able to do this. But because you will refuse to take part in the unfolding of this story, until your dying breath, I can give you that which is meaningless to the world, but of immeasurable meaning to you. To one man, and one woman, and nothing more. And for what it is worth, I still remain truly regretful that this came to pass in the first place. Your regret means nothing to us,
the Guardian told him, voice empty and bleak.
For what we have both endured, we will never accept your apologies, or your decisions. And yet,
she bowed her head, resting it upon Martin's shoulder, as did he upon hers.
This choice of yours, and this alone. We understand. Then that is enough,
Loden said, his voice fading away.
We are done, then, you and I. The slate may never be even, or clean, but let it be gone. It is over, now at long last, and I wish you luck, though you will never wish me the same.
Without a word, Nina slipped away, leaving the two of them there alone in the room, locked in each other's embrace, heads upon each other's shoulders with their eyes closed, standing in the sunlight. For some strange reason, she found herself crying, and she honestly had no idea whatsoever as to why. The rooms they had been given in the palace were the most opulent Ryu had ever lived in, even outstripping those they had received both in Sima Fort and High Fort. At the moment, though, he didn't really care, which would have been an alien concept to him less than a year ago. He had changed a lot in the space of 6 months, he mused as he lay on his bed and stared up at the ceiling. They all had, Nina as much as any of the others. When he and Dees had gone into the crypt, they had found her floating back out to meet them, apparently unscathed. He had had his doubts about that, but what had caught his attention were her eyes. There was something different about them now, a cold, hard resolve that hadn't been there before. As happy as he was to see that, having always worried about that aspect of her personality, it was more than a little disquieting as well. He knew there was something she wasn't telling him about her plan, something he was missing, but he couldn't place it. Once they'd returned to the palace proper, Nina had informed them of the plan to awaken the breath of wind tomorrow at dawn. This caused a certain amount of grumbling from certain quarters, but nobody had actually complained, which meant Ryu hadn't had to put his foot down. Strangely enough, Dees hadn't been among them, which was more than a little suspicious. She was one of, if not the latest riser among the group. Nina had asked to speak with her mother and father again, this time in private. Mina had apparently locked herself in her rooms and refused to come out, something else which Ryu found disquieting. The younger sister was a good friend of more than half the group, and at least an acquaintance of the rest. He had expected her to come by and see them by now. If something had happened to her, he was sure somebody would have told them, so it was simply another mystery on top of many others that made the current situation suspicious. The rest of the group had spread throughout the palace and the city then, once it was apparent that they had the rest of the day off. Ryu had mostly drifted around, though he made sure to keep an eye on everyone else. By doing so, he noticed that Nina was spending time with those among the group she was closest to, roof-hopping with Kat, painting with Jean, and sharing a bottle of wine with Dees. Each time, however, he only found out after the fact. By the time he found them, she was always gone, and all three seemed as troubled as he, though none could say why. In the end, he didn't see Nina again until dinner, which they'd had in a private dining room again. The princess seemed to be in unusually good spirits that night, yet another thing which he found unsettling, considering how somber she had been for most of their return to India. He didn't call her on it, though. It was obvious that she wanted to enjoy the night, and he wasn't going to take that from her. Everybody else seemed to have the same thought in mind. Even Rand was able to put his anger aside, and they'd all simply enjoyed each other's company in a way that was still surprising to Ryu after how long it had been just him and Bao. A knocking on his door drew his attention away from his recollection of the day. Standing, he walked over and opened it, glad that he hadn't undressed just yet. Nina was standing there, in the blue dress she normally wore under her enchanted robes.
Hello, Ryu.
She smiled slightly, though her eyes remained distant.
Would you mind if we talked for a bit? Not at all.
He shook his head.
Where did you want to go? Is the balcony down the hall all right?
She asked.
I know it's getting cold out, but I've always liked it. It's fine.
Ryu nodded, reaching up behind the door and pulling down a jacket that had been left there by the staff. Pulling it on, he followed her out to the balcony.
To be honest, I'm surprised you're not cold in that. Not that I'm complaining or anything. I'll have you know that of the women in this group, I'm by far the most conservative dresser, with or without our armor,
she replied calmly.
Besides, I grew up here, remember? I'm used to cold weather. My first summer in Oria, I thought I was going to burst into flame. That would be pretty bad, wouldn't it?
Ryu chuckled.
Hadn't thought of it that way. I'm lucky, I guess. Gate was kind of in between the two. When I came up north, yeah, it was pretty cold in winter, but not too much worse than I was used to. The same with Orion summers. I think Bao had it worse than either of us for those. With his fur.
Nina winced.
Most likely.
She fell silent then, staring up at the night sky, and Ryu remained quiet as well. He had the feeling she was trying to work herself up to something, and didn't want to push her. Eventually, she spoke again.
Do you ever wish things hadn't changed, from those days? That we had just gone on living our lives, the way we normally did back then, instead of getting mixed up in all of this? Not really,
Ryu replied honestly, shaking his head.
I'll admit that a lot of what's happened hasn't really been pleasant, and I'm looking forward to the day we can put all this destiny bullshit behind us. But the thing is, for all that sucked, it's brought us together, too. If none of this had happened, I never would have met you, or Kat, or any of the others. One of these days, we'll get through all of this, and when we do, we'll still have each other. We'll all finally have a place where we belong. That makes it worth it. I suppose it does,
she agreed wistfully.
Rand and Jean are the only ones who really had that before joining up, aren't they? None of the rest of us did. And now we do.
She glanced at him, green eyes still bearing that same strange resolve.
We've changed, haven't we? Only a few months ago, we were wondering whether we should even admit the destiny bullshit even existed or just ignore it. Now we're charging at it with everything we have, and we're not going to stop until it's all been played out. Maybe we're growing up a little.
Ryu shrugged, then smirked.
Okay, no, I can't keep a straight face while saying that. Not if I'm talking about Bao and Kat and Jean.
He dropped the smirk then.
Maybe that's just how bad it's gotten, then. We can't just pretend we don't know what's happening anymore. Whether we like it or not, the destiny bullshit is going to keep on screwing up our lives, until we put a stop to it. If the only way to get out alive is to play along with the script until the final act's over, that's just what we'll have to do. My ancestors said something about that, too,
Nina told him quietly.
She asked me if I had the guts to actually come out and openly claim intent to save the world. To call myself a hero. And what did you say?
Ryu asked, just as quietly, as they continued looking into each other's eyes.
I told her that if that was what was necessary, then I would do it,
Nina said, calm and cool.
I couldn't claim I would enjoy it, though. Or be proud of it. But if that was what I needed to do, then I could. That's what it really comes down to, isn't it?
Ryu slowly nodded.
If we go through with this, and word gets out, we'll probably get called heroes, too. And we won't actually deserve that. But if that's what we have to do, well. It won't be anything even close to the worst that's happened to us because of this destiny bullshit. We can live with it. And when we're done, we'll put it behind us, just like everything else. Do what we must today, so that we won't have to tomorrow.
Nina smiled, slight and sad.
The story of this year, in a nutshell.
She bit her lip.
Listen, Ryu. Yeah?
He asked, gently, after she trailed off.
It's nothing.
She shook her head.
Forget it. Just. Would you kiss me? Just one more time.
Ryu didn't bother responding with words. He took her in his arms, and as she wrapped hers around him as well, they brought their lips together like they had once before. The taste of lavender was still there, but the feeling of delicate weakness had changed. Her body was still as frail as ever, but something in her spirit had grown tougher, and it was reflected in the way she felt in his embrace.
Thank you,
she whispered after a moment that seemed like forever and was far too short at the same time. He released her, and she drew back, closing her eyes and looking away.
I'll see you in the morning. Nina.
Ryu raised a hand, but she was already gone, walking back inside to leave him alone on the balcony. Glancing up, Ryu realized that the first snow of winter had apparently started falling several minutes ago. Without either of them noticing, the snowflakes were drifting gently downward over him and the balcony and the mountainside below. He stayed out there for some time more regardless before turning in, his thoughts troubled, resolving that the next morning he'd ask her to tell him whatever it was he was missing, no matter what it was. Power. We need yet more of your power. God needs more of your power. Give your soul to God. Pray to God. Praise God. Sacrifice your heart and mind to God. You will become God's power. When a familiar scream rang through the air several hours later, he jerked bolt upright. It was Nina's voice. Before he could run outside, however, something else caught his attention, an envelope with his name on it that had been slipped under his door. More importantly, it was Nina's handwriting on it.
What's going on?
He muttered, scream and envelope both entirely incomprehensible to him in his groggy state.
Why would she leave?
The answer struck him like a thunderbolt. The only reason she would leave him something like this would be if she wouldn't be able to tell him it in person. The scream forgotten, he dived out of the bed and snatched the envelope up, almost ripping it in half in his haste to get the note inside out and over to the moonlight shining in the window. Ryu. By the time you read this, I'm afraid it will be too late. I will already have become the great bird, and because of the weakened state of the breath of wind, I will be unable to change back, ever again. Please don't hate me, even if you can't forgive me, for deceiving you like this. I had to. For you, and for our friends, and for my family, and for the world. Only a descendant of the Queen of the Sky can inherit her breath. It's the only way. I enjoyed our time together in these past few months more than any time in my entire life. Even more than when I was a girl still living in Windia. I've written letters like this to all the others, so I won't need to ask you to tell them anything I'm not telling you. Though I will always love my father and mother and sister, I love all of you as family as well. You've become a second family to me, one I love as much as my first, and I will do whatever I must to free you from fate's control of our lives. More than any of them, though, I love you, Ryu. I wish I could have kissed you more often. I wish we could have done more than kiss. I wish I could have. No. Enough. The only good thing about this is that I'll be out of the way of you and Kat. I think that's what's been hardest on all three of us, with me and her being best friends, and you being what you are to us, and us to you. I hope you'll always love me, even when I'm a bird, but I know you love her too, and I hope you both have a long, happy life. I'm trusting you to do that, Ryu. You, and her, and the rest of you. Win this. Break free of the destiny bullshit, and live a life worth living. And if you can, always remember my name for me, even after I have forgotten it. Once more, I love you. Goodbye. Nina Windia.
Shit.
Throwing his clothes on in record time, he burst out of the room at the same time as Kat, who was holding a similar piece of paper crumpled in her fist.
What the hell is this?
She snarled, whirling towards Nina's open door without even seeing him, as the others began piling out, some still groggy, others alert and angry.
What do you freaking mean? It looks like you win. Hey! Shut up, shut up, shut up!
Deez yelled back, appearing in the doorway of Nina's room.
None of that matters now. It's gone. The mark of the great bird is gone. Somebody took it. What?
Ryu shouted.
Who would?
Only a descendant of the Queen of the Sky can inherit her breath.
Oh, Lawton,
he whispered, as the zenny dropped, and he realized why Nina was already gone.
Mina. We need to get up to that tower.
Deez whirled towards the end of the hallway.
Now.
Despite her best efforts, Nina found herself unable to sleep more than a few hours that night, and even those were uneasy. The rest of the time she simply spent tossing and turning before eventually giving up and rising. She supposed it wouldn't make much difference in a few more hours anyways. She tried various things to distract herself, reading a book, sketching something, or just looking out the window and counting the stars. Every time, she always found herself going back to pacing restlessly around the room. Thus, when she heard a knock on her door, shortly before dawn, she answered it almost immediately, grateful for any sort of distraction.
Hey, Nina,
Deez said, looking outwardly calm, which was more of a giveaway than any outward display of emotion. Deez never looked cold and quiet under normal circumstances, at least not without enough sarcasm to drown a wail.
Can't sleep, hey. Nerves,
Nina admitted.
It's more surprising that you can't than me, really. Hilarious.
Deez rolled her eyes.
For your information, I conked out early tonight to make sure I'd be up before anybody else. Mind if I come in? Not at all.
Nina stepped back, and the snake woman slithered into her room. Not for the first time, Nina idly noted that she had adjusted to her friend's non-human form with surprising readiness. It just seemed natural for her, and that helped smooth over the strangeness of seeing her without legs now.
What's going on? I thought we should talk a little more, before you go through with this,
Deez explained, closing the door behind her and sitting in a chair, most of her tail curling up below it.
Listen, Nina. Are you absolutely sure this is the right thing to do? I am,
Nina replied, sitting down next to her.
I wasn't until today, but when I faced my ancestor, I realized that I would have to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it. That doesn't sound very good to me, Nina,
Deez said, shaking her head.
Let me put it another way, then. Are you sure you want to do this?
Nina started to respond, then paused, before lowering her head.
No. No, I don't want to do it, Deez. It's the last thing in the world I want to do. I don't want to become a bird for the rest of my life, Deez. I really don't. It scares me to think about it, and it hurts, too. I'll never be able to look at any of you the same ever again, or speak with you, or anything that I enjoy doing. Then why?
Deez asked gently, no judgment or accusation in her voice, just curiosity.
Why are you doing this, if you feel that strongly against it? Because I have to,
Nina explained.
Because it's the only way. There's no other way we'll ever be able to get onto Avray, especially now that Ray's turned against us. And we have to do that. Both because of Ran's mother, and because that's where our enemies are.
She raised her head again, and met Dee's eyes.
That's where they always were, weren't they? The Church of Saint Eva has been the problem the entire time. You've always known, but you never told us, because you knew we wouldn't believe you until we saw their corruption with our own eyes. Especially Ryu, and Bao, and Cat. You've been putting a lot of things together today, haven't you?
Dees murmured, sounding impressed if not quite approving.
How did you figure that one out? Once you consider the possibility, everything makes sense,
Nina said simply.
Those three were, up until recently, true believers, however inconsistent they were about actually attending services. And then there was our friendship with Ray. There was simply no way you could tell us. But everything that's happened recently, that fourth demon lord who was here most of all. It's so obvious, in retrospect. And you know about things like this. It's part of being who you are, isn't it? Being the intermediary between us and Lawton. Now that's impressive.
Dees raised an eyebrow.
Not even anybody from your ancestors' team figured that one out, let alone any of the ones before them. Yeah, that's pretty much what it comes down to, in the end. I don't know everything, of course. Lawton makes sure to leave out anything I'd consider over the line, so by the time it happens it's too late for me to stop it. That's why I'm worried about this. Because I don't know what's going to happen, and every time that happens, it's always something bad. Worse than me turning into a bird permanently.
Nina asked, smiling sarcastically. She knew this wasn't the time for black humor, but she couldn't stop herself.
Point.
Dees shook her head.
But I just can't shake the feeling that he's up to something. Listen, did anything happen down there? Anything I wouldn't expect? Well.
Nina hesitated before slowly nodding.
Yes. Maybe. I don't know if you did or not, but... My ancestor, the Queen of the Sky. The last Nimawindia. She's alive again, Dees. Lawton gave her body back, once she had passed the breath of wind onto me. Well,
Dees echoed, after a long period of silence, staring straight ahead.
Interesting. I wish I had known that that was going to happen. But that's not quite what I'm thinking of. Look. I know this is going to be kind of insensitive, but can I talk? You know. Mechanics, here? About how it all works, even if it makes destiny bullshit seem nice by comparison. Dees.
Nina gave her a direct look.
That's why we're friends. Because neither of us gets emotional about things like that very often, if we have any choice in the matter. I'll grant you that Sten and Spar are better at it than either of us, but them aside, we're better at that than any of the others. Yeah, okay.
Dees sighed.
It's just... This gives me the creeps, you know? Talking about our lives this way.
She took a deep breath before continuing.
Alright. There's something going on with numbers, alright? It's like this. There are 9 of us, this time. Nero doesn't count, since he's not a fighter. Last time there were 8. The time before that, it was 7. And the thing is, Lawton might plan to screw us all over and claim it was the only way, but he never plans to mess with that number. If we screw up, and die in a fight, that's one thing, but something like this? Deliberate? No. It's not his style, and it's not his pattern. You mean, me leaving the team?
Nina frowned.
But then, why would he set this up in the first place? This one can't be the demons. He put the Queen of the Sky in that statue deliberately in order to prepare for this day. I know.
Dees scowled.
That's what's pissing me off. He's up to something, and I don't know what. I'm the only one who can, though,
Nina told her.
Aren't I? No.
Dee's eyes suddenly widened.
That's it. Damn that old snake. Where's the mark of the great bird? Where did you put it? In my dresser,
Nina said, confused.
Why does it?
In an instant, she realized the sorceress meaning, and her heart froze in horror for half a second before she bolted from her chair to check the top drawer of the dresser, where she had put it. The slip of paper with the mark of the great bird on it was gone.
No.
Nina screamed, involuntarily, as she whirled around, her thoughts so disoriented that she tried to run and fly at the same time, and ended up flinging herself flat on her face. As she pulled herself back up, she saw Dees rising as well, and heard the others outside start to yell. Fortunately, she managed to beat the sorceress to the door, otherwise, Nina probably would have simply crashed into her without even noticing. As she rushed out of the hallway of their guest rooms, she heard the others piling out into it as well, and Dees shouting back at them, but Nina had no comprehension of just what it was that any of them were saying. Her mind was blank, and her senses numb. Everything was focused on the single, overriding need to get to the ceremonial tower before it was too late, a thought that flared in her mind, burning away anything else that threatened to distract her even slightly. Before dawn, the only other people in the halls were startled guards, until she finally reached the ceremonial tower after a few minutes that seemed like an eternity. There, something finally penetrated her mind. Her father was there, sitting in a wheelchair, with her mother behind him. Despite his obviously poor health, his eyes held both a great sadness and a great resolve, as did her mother's, though in her case it was more of the former and less of the latter.
Nina, wait,
he said as she pulled at the door. It was locked, and neither of them would have found that odd, if they had been waiting for her before opening it.
I know that you feel this is your duty, but there's no time.
Nina sobbed, panicked, as she flew back and raised one hand.
Get back. Nina.
The queen gasped before throwing herself before her husband as Nina blew the door off its hinges with a fireball.
Nina, what on? It's Mina.
Nina screamed as she continued onward, up the stairs.
She stole the mark of the great bird. She's up there.
Without waiting for their response, she flew up the stairs, all 4 flights, and emerged atop the tower. There, a smaller room stood on the roof, 4 tall walls covered in windows, with only a single door. A double door of lost technology, of metal and electricity, that was now closed tightly. Nina threw herself at it, but it refused to budge.
Mina. I know you're in there. Open this door immediately. Nina.
Her sister's voice came from the other side, soft and afraid.
You're here. Thank you. I'm glad you came. So I could say goodbye to you. No.
Nina backed up, leveled her hands, and blasted the door with electricity, but the massive slabs of steel were only slightly scorched.
You're not doing this, Mina. I won't let you. Open this door.
She summoned Frost, but the door repelled that as well. Something in the technology kept it from icing over.
What do you think you're doing? Nina, please,
Mina kept saying, apparently ignoring the sounds of the magic.
Just listen to me, alright? I know, I don't have any right to ask anything of you, after the way I treated you, but please. Just open the door.
Nina focused her concentration, whispered the words, and summoned the massive hands of flame, but even they failed to do any more than blacken the surface of the tower top.
Why are you doing this, Mina? Why?
Because, Mina told her from behind the door, as Nina sagged back to the floor, defeated. None of her spells would be able to budge it.
Because I didn't know anything, for so long. I never understood anything. I didn't want to. I refused to understand, on purpose. Is she in there?
Kat demanded as she rushed out of the tower, effortlessly carrying the king's wheelchair in front of her. When Nina nodded, she set it down with a grunt before rushing the door.
Sorry about the roughness, your majesty, but I gotta get this thing open.
Charging the door, she slammed into it with a spin kick, only to rebound, hissing in pain.
Shit. What's this thing made out of, hey? Kat.
Mina said, sounding startled.
You're there, too? Is everybody else? We're all here, Mina,
her father called, before breaking down in a coughing fit as the queen and the rest of the group began pouring out onto the roof.
Father.
Mina murmured.
Then mother is there, too. I'm sorry, to both of you, too. For all the horrible things I said to you, over the years, about what you both did to Nina. I never understood how much it had hurt you both, how much it cost you. How you did it to save her life, because it was the only way you could. I didn't understand anything. We never blamed you, Mina,
the queen replied with a desperate, deliberately enforced calm.
Please, come out here, and we can talk. I was so stupid,
Mina suddenly hissed, her voice breaking, tears audible even if they couldn't see her.
I was such a child. Why couldn't I understand? Why didn't I realize just how much your wings endangered you, Nina? She's not opening it.
Ryu yelled.
She's made up her mind. Then we'll have to open it for her.
Rand roared, charging like a bull with his head down. The huge farm clansman's massive body slammed into the door, shaking the entire tower, and then he fell back, dazed.
Ugh. That thing's even thicker than the one we had back in High Fort,
Sten growled, staring at the door.
No force field, but I don't think it needs one. All I could think about was my own selfishness,
Mina continued, still ignoring all the noise.
I just wanted my sister back, and when I couldn't have that, I refused to let myself understand why. But now I know better. I understand that, and so much more. I know who you are, and how important what you're doing is. That doesn't matter.
Bao yelled.
Damn it, Mina, none of us want you to do this. Why do you think Nina didn't tell us it would be permanent? She knew we'd never agree to it. I never should have told you, either.
Nina sobbed, rising and slamming herself at the door again. If Kat and Rand had both failed, she knew she didn't stand a chance of budging it, but logic didn't matter.
What are you saying, Mina? No, you were right to tell me,
Mina said slowly.
If you hadn't, and you had turned into the great bird, I would have stayed like that, all my life. Stupid and selfish and childish. But when I calmed down, after last night, I started thinking, and I wanted to know why. So I found out, and I realized just how important all of this is. Why you were fighting against demons. That it wasn't for the money. That it was to save the world. It's not more important than you are, you silly girl.
Rand bellowed.
Stop it. We'll find another way. There is no other way,
Mina said, an edge finally coming into her voice.
Laden himself foretold that the descendant of the Queen of the Sky would become the great bird, and the heroes of destiny would fly on its wings. Its wings, daughter.
The king shouted.
It's, not hers. Did you really think I would let either of you make this sacrifice? My own daughters? Never. My life is at an end in this body anyways. If anybody would.
He started coughing again.
Of course.
Dee snapped her fingers.
That's what the old snake planned. Listen to him, Mina. You're not the one, and neither is Nina. You never were. Thank you, father,
Mina whispered.
But you, and mother, and Nina have all suffered enough already. I was the only one too childish to realize that. I can't ask you to give your life up for me. That's why I made a deal with him. With Father Manson. What?
Half the people on the roof roared.
He told me that if I took my sister's place, that Saint Eva would heal my father, even if he refused to convert,
Mina explained.
You'll get better, father. You'll live, and so will Nina. And now that she's been acknowledged, she'll be able to come back home. And she's strong, now. Strong enough that nobody will ever be able to hurt her because of the color of her wings, ever again. You'll be able to have your life together, as a family, again. Mina.
The queen whispered.
We can't. We don't want that if you won't be with us.
Nina shrieked, stumbling back away from the door.
You're my sister too, Mina. We love you, too. If you don't want us to suffer anymore, don't do this to us. Out of the way.
Dee shouted, and Kat jumped forward to pull Nina away. The sorceress raised her staff, eyes grim, and a blinding flash of light appeared before the door, too bright to look at. As they all jerked their eyes away, there was a detonation that rang their skulls, even from that far away, with its loudness. But when they looked back, though the top of the tower was cratered before the door, it itself was still standing, as were the walls around it.
Damn it all. Damn this technology, damn the past for creating it, and damn Miria for bringing it to this world in the first place. I'm sorry,
Mina said, once the noise had died down.
But I've made up my mind. I have to do my part to save the world as well. For my family, and my friends. For all of you. But I'm not strong, like you are, Nina. Like any of you. I can't destroy your enemies with magic like you or Dee's. I can't keep you alive like Bao or Rand. I can't fight things like Ryu or Kat. I can't do any of those things, let alone all of them, like Sten and Jean and Spar. But all of you can do these things. You're strong, unbelievably so. You can save the world, for mother and father, and everybody else. That's why I want them to stay, to live in that world. And I want all of you to save it, together. Enough.
Ryu roared, and everybody moved further back as he transformed into a dragon of flames, and blasted the door with everything he had. But even that failed, and he soon turned back, collapsing to the floor, exhausted and defeated.
Damn it. Mina, please, don't do this. Was that the breath of fire, Ryu?
Mina asked, sounding sad now.
I always wished I could see it, and now I never will. Please. If you can forgive me, even a little. When I become a bird, come fly with me sometime, like our ancestors did. I can't love you like Nina does. But you're like a brother to me, now. If I could have a brother, who would come flying with me sometime. I think I'd like that, even if I was just a bird. Listen to us, please.
Jean begged.
Mademoiselle Mina, this is foolishness. And Prince Jean.
Mina continued.
You're like a brother to me, too. Ever since you came to visit me and Nina, when we were children. When you would talk Nina and Beretta into taking me along with you when you snuck out of the palace, to go on adventures. Those are some of the happiest memories I have. Please remember them happily, too. NDs. When I first came to visit Nina, in Oria, you treated me like I was your little sister, as much as Nina did. I was so happy when I heard you had joined up. Stay with them, please. Don't ever leave them, like I am. Mina, don't.
Bao whispered, as Dees went pale.
Don't do this.
Cat begged.
Bao and Cat,
Mina said, sounding slightly more cheerful now.
I was so happy, making friends with you. Bao, you were so funny. It was like you didn't even care that I was a princess, you just wanted me to like you. How could I not? And Cat. You were my hero, you know? When you and Ryu and Nina saved me from the jokers. I wanted so much to be like you. To be so happy and tough and cool. For a short time, I even dreamed about running away to join you all. To join your group. Isn't that silly? It's not silly at all, Mina,
her mother whispered.
Why? Why didn't you tell us any of this? About all of these people? About how much they had done for you? Because I was silly,
Mina told her.
You and father. And Nina. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just hope that you can still love me, even as a bird. Even after everything I've done. How could we not?
Her father murmured, his voice broken.
How could I ever not love both of you? Mina.
Nina whispered, trying one last time.
Please, don't. I'm sorry, Nina,
Mina replied, her voice resolute, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon.
Thank you, you and mother and father. For being my family. And all of the rest of you, too. Ryu, and Jean, and Dees, and Bao, and Cat, and Rand, and Sten, and Spar. Tell Nero, too, when you see him. Thank you, all of you, for being my friends. Don't.
Ryu lunged forward, hammering on the doors with his fists.
Don't throw your life away, Mina. You can join up. When you get old enough, you'll be just as strong as any of us. We'll make sure you are. Okay? You can. I promise. I can't,
Mina said, as the light increased, and her voice began to change, becoming higher, more musical. 5 beams of light began to rise from inside the room, through the roof, followed by a 6th in the center.
The world is in peril, and father is dying, and Rand's mother is being held by them. You need the breath of wind now. I can't join you, Ryu. I'm not strong enough. The only way I can help you save the world now is to be your wings.
And the sun rose, and then it was too late. Soon, the door opened, and they all walked inside, one by one. As they passed through, Dees murmured something about how it was probably on a time lock. Ryu didn't bother trying to understand that, his attention was focused on the great bird before them, almost the size of a house. She sat on a dais in the center of the room, surrounded by 5 short pillars, each topped by a crystal ball, in a star formation. The dais at the center held the crest of the royal family on it, and it still glowed faintly from the magic that had awakened the breath of wind. The bird was beautiful, despite the basic shape of a predator, perhaps a hawk or falcon. Her eyes were dark and soft, and her feathers vibrant. Most of them were a gentle pink, but those along the backs of her wings and tail were all the colors of the rainbow, from red to purple and back again, contrasting the black of her beak and feet. She didn't seem discomfited by being trapped in the room until they opened the door, nor by the people quietly approaching her. She simply chirped happily as Nina floated over and put a hand to the side of her neck.
Oh, Mina.
The princess whispered, prompting a quizzical trill and a tilt of the head.
Your Majesties,
Ryu said to the king and queen, bowing down on one knee.
Words cannot express. We. Stand up, young man,
the king said quietly.
This was through no fault of yours. But we.
Cat whispered, covering her eyes with one hand.
If we hadn't come here, and the only ones who hold any blame for this are your enemies,
the queen said sadly.
I assume that they include Father Manson, who I also do not doubt has already fled our country. Yeah.
Ryu nodded slowly, as he felt a burning rage grow within him, stronger than it had ever been, even than when he had faced Uruhameral.
There are enemies. We'll find them. Manson and Gabriel and Baruberi and all the rest of them. And we'll kill those bastards. Every last one. No more bullshitting,
Bao agreed.
Not anymore. We can't do that now. Not after this. If we're supposed to be heroes, then fine. We'll be heroes. We can do that, if we have to. For her. For Mina,
Nina said quietly, scratching the great bird's neck, which it seemed to enjoy, chirping happily.
Mother. Father. We know,
the king told her.
You will come back, yes? Once you have finished this. I will,
Nina promised.
I don't know when. And when I do, I don't know what I'll be back for, aside from seeing you again. But I will be back. One day. Then we can talk of things then.
The queen smiled sadly.
We're sorry, but perhaps it would be best if we left.
Nina nodded.
When the court hears of this, we shouldn't be here. Then when you return,
the king said, as Nina turned to Ryu again.
Hey, Nina.
He started to say, then paused, as he saw her face. She was no longer crying, she hadn't since they'd opened the door.
Please,
Nina said, looking from one of them to another. Bo's face was resolute, and Kat's both sad and angry. Rand's features held disbelief, and Jean's sorrow. Sten and Spar both looked blank, and Dee's distant.
Please, don't say anything, just yet. Not about this. It's happened, and we can't change it now. I won't cry any more tears. Not just yet. Not until we save the world, for Mina's sake, like she asked us to.
Her voice turned hard and dark.
And we kill every single demon on the face of this earth, and beneath it as well, and their damned devil god. Let's go, Ryu. Let's go, everybody. Yeah,
Ryu said quietly.
Let's go. To Evray. Let's save the world.
And the great bird sang its song of hope, unknowing and unable to know of despair ever again. 'Cause I don't want to be alone tonight. End Book 2, Mercenary.